Wayzgoose 2018. Small studio, broad-shouldered city. Jen Farrell of Starshaped Press.
Hello. How you doing? All right. So I'm Jen. Thank you for the nice introduction. Here from Chicago. I have been running Starshaped Press since 1999, but it's been my full-time job since 2001. And mostly what I've done is focus on printing commercial work for just average, normal people in the community and all over the country. Everything from business cards, social stationery, music packaging, whatever I can actually create on the presses that I have. They're just a few projects. And I love it because I was trained as a designer and I wanted to work with people. So when I was 18, I moved to Chicago at that tender age, and it was in the midst of the Riot Grrrl movement, the DIY movement, kids trying to own the means of production so that they could create their own work and work outside of a system that was very difficult to get into. And it was pretty exciting to be a part of that. It was printing, it was design, it was music, it was publishing. And I met some pretty great people who were doing this type of work. It was also at the height of a new thing called web design. So when I was in school, everything was moving to screens, which I found kind of depressing because I wanted to work with my hands. So while I was there, I worked at a couple of record stores, and all this packaging started coming in that was totally inspiring and fascinating. And I didn't know how it was made. I just knew that I wanted to do it. So this is actually collections, some stuff from my own collection of work that was done by Fireproof Press, which was in Chicago at the time, and also from Independent Project Press, which was in Arizona at the time. And it was really fantastic. So when I was at Columbia College, one of the guys I worked for had started Fireproof, and he knew the other guy who was still running it, so he helped me get a job there. And that's where I learned that knowing people in the arts field is almost more important than what you actually do in the arts field. So I started working for John, and it was some of the best years of my life. I had so much fun because I didn't have to actually run the business. For him, I think it was extremely difficult. This is a bit of detritus left over from my Fireproof days. He used to, we had this little mascot, and he'd leave all these funny notes for me whenever he had to go do something so that I would know what to print because we didn't have smartphones. And it was great. So he ended up folding the press. He took a job at Columbia. He helped me get a job there in the lab, working in the graphics lab at night so I could print during the day. We're still really great friends. This is a little new home announcement that he had me print for his family when they bought a house a couple years ago. So we still stay in touch. In 2001, I went to my first Wayzgoose, which was in Illinois, and that's where I met this guy, Paul. If you've ever had the pleasure to meet him, then you know what a character he is. This is actually at his printing museum, which is north of Chicago by about an hour. And he made this sign because I was going up there all the time. So he made it Starshaped Press North, which sounds very official. And I actually went up there every week for about 2 years, right when I started printing full-time in 2001. And it's the only way to learn how to do this. You have to ingratiate yourself with people who know how to do it, because at the time it wasn't taught. So we got to be pretty close. This is a shot of the studio now. It is always this clean. And it's pretty great. So it's been amassing quite a collection of things. At this period of time, the early 2000s, I was still doing a lot with handset type, trying to do more, still did a lot of work with magnesium plates. I took on work that would have gone to Fireproof Press, and so it was just a hodgepodge of things. And also around then, I noticed that stationery started to get very homogenized because people were designing things digitally and creating polymer plates, and so they could just print those plates versus actually working with metal and wood type. And I'm not knocking that. although this is kind of how I felt about it. And I just knew I didn't want to do it because I wanted to make sure that I was still using materials or I was working with my hands all the time. And in 2006, this happened. I had this kid, and there were some challenges with that because I was trying to run a business and had been running a business. I had a lot of vendors suddenly treat me like a mom who had a cute side business, which was pretty infuriating. So I took a little time off and tried to figure out what jobs were the most important for me going forward. And that's when I decided I would only work with metal and wood type and not magnesium plates. I would not take on any other largely commercial projects. So I just started to keep collecting as much type as possible. And metal type is still relatively affordable, even now. So these are just some pieces from my collection. Yeah. So to me, it's really important that I work with people, that I work with my community, that I communicate clearly what I'm doing. And I've had to find some ways to do that over the years just to make sure that I can actually use these materials. So in this image at the top, this was an opening for a jewelry studio. The top is actually a screenshot from a digital mock-up that I did to show this particular client because clients are not visual people. So you need them to see what you're doing. Well, when you're only working with a hands-on material, that can be difficult. So I've found ways to scan a lot of my type collection to build it digitally so that I can do some mock-ups on the computer and then actually set it. So the bottom is that same section that's actually printed. So there are some differences based on what I had. Now, most of the time, those differences are negligible to the person who's not as trained to see it as I am or some other typographer. And I find that if it's really different, then I go back to them and say, hey, I don't have this letter for this typeface, but I have this that's pretty cool. Can we do that? So the design process and the communication is very organic. And there's a lot going on here. But this is your average job in the studio. And it's a wedding invite. There's a couple of proofs, black and white proofs off my press. There's a digital build, the red and blue, that's a printout from the computer. Then I set all the type and pull a carbon paper proof, that little sliver. Then you see the type, and then there's a tiny bit of the actual finished piece. So yes, it is an elaborate process, but to me, it's really rewarding because I can force the type to do things that you think it might not be able to do. I work a lot with people in my community. I feel like it's really important. I can't always give money to all the things that I want to give to, but I can work in trade, and I can also work for people that don't suck, and in turn, we all help each other out. This is a cafe that I live at when I'm not at the studio, and they asked a number of local artists to do prints and posters when they rebranded themselves and opened. So you could see some of the type that I've created for them out of little tiny ornaments. This Bloomingdale Trail is pretty great. This was an old train line, freight train line that runs from the west side to the east to Chicago. And it was, over the last few years, reconverted into this new, I have to say it's better than the High Line in New York because it's more functional. So I will throw that down. It is a bike path. It's a running path. It has 6 gardens. It has playgrounds. They do yoga every day at some of these points. It's a fascinating piece of the city. So they had asked, this one group asked if I could create these prints that they could use as fundraisers and also to give to their donors who helped make the whole thing happen. This Chirp Radio is the Chicago Independent Radio Project. About 10, 12 years ago, a bunch of pissed off college DJs who were getting pushed out of their station decided they would create their own station, which again, like, this is the spirit of Chicago, and Chicago respects the people who do. And there's a lot of people I know that do. And these people took 10 years to be able to get a license to have their own radio station, but they did it. So they were internet only for a long time, and just this last year finally got this signal. So I've worked with them on a number of projects, and it's a really fantastic station. Herbs in Horto is one of Chicago's mottos, which means city in a garden. If you've ever been there or spent any time there, you know how seriously we take our green and garden space, not just downtown, but in pretty much every single neighborhood. So this print was actually done for a local gallery known as Gallery F. They had asked a bunch of local printmakers to contribute to this theme, Herbs in Horto. Now, when this gallery says, can you do this? My answer is always yes, because the focus that they have is on outsider artists, street artists, printmakers, people who often get disenfranchised from the arts and gallery space as a whole. So when they say jump, I say, how high? And they sell great, and within 3 years of opening, they were turning a profit. So there was definitely a market for it in the city. That's some of the type from it. And most of the things I'm showing I actually have upstairs at my table if you want to see them up close, which is a little more fun. In the last few years, I've got to collaborate with some really incredible women, especially in this field, which is important to me. And one of them was Jessie Reich, who was working out of the Bixler Letter Foundry in upstate New York as one of the few young typecasters working in the country now. Her attention to detail is absolutely stunning, and so we were a friendship in need of a project. And I designed a series of ornaments based on architectural elements of the city that I live in and things that I see every day. So we developed this Chicago collection of metal type. We had the matrices made, and she cast them all, and every time we cast another 50 sets, they sold immediately. So I don't actually have any of the 2 collections we've made. We're hoping to do more in the future. We just haven't gotten there yet because it's a very time-consuming process. I also got to work with Jerry, a virgin wood type, who's here today, and you should go see her type because she's making some of the finest type in the world. I designed 2 sets of ornaments that she then cut on the traditional pantograph method, and she's also talking about it today, which is worth checking out. They were 2 sets named Ida and Lucy, for Ida Turkle and Lucy Parsons, 2 badass women in the history of Chicago. And they turned out really excellent, and you can check them out upstairs. This was one of the first projects I printed using those. So as I look forward, I have to keep in mind that, to me, I see around me that the market is always changing for the kind of work that I do. And I can't do the same kinds of projects I did 15 or 20 years ago because other people are doing those kinds of projects. So I want to keep pushing myself onward and upward with new types of work. So I've been pushing more into book arts and some limited edition portfolio projects and just some quirky stuff that's outside of working on commissions like I've always done. So one of the projects that was fun, where I got to tie in all the people that I know in the city and in my community, was this Dollhouse Gig Posters project. This was done because most of my friends are screen printers, and they print these big, beautiful, colorful prints. And whenever I was in a show with them, I'd have these tiny, dingy, dirty-looking little letterpress prints. And I thought, well, screen printing does big, colorful things really well. Well, letterpress does really small things really well. So I thought, well, I'll make gig posters for dollhouses then. So I created a subscription series where people bought in, and the first month you got a real box with your first tiny poster, and everything was designed to look like comic book, the back ads of comic books for things you could get in the 50s and 60s and send away for. And so they weren't band specific, they were genre specific. So I got to have fun with stereotypes of each of these different styles of music. And then every couple of months you'd get bonus things, a bonus print and bonus tattoos and, you know, just a bunch of goofy stuff. And then the final month we actually did flexi disc records, which if you know what they are, you've just dated yourself, because I discovered that no one younger than me usually does. And it was, the song on them is a love song told in printer's terms by my boss, who taught me how to print at Fireproof Press. So it's all full circle on that one. Another thing I've seen a lot of is using metal and wood type to create the female form over the last century. I don't generally like how it's done. I think it's all done through a male gaze, and I thought I could do it better. So I did a project called Dance Party with the girls of Starshaped Press and set forms. I'm showing you the forms. The actual prints are upstairs. So I set 4 forms of girl-based subcultures that were representing women that I hung out with when I first moved to the city. So we have this rude girl who's in ska. We have a mod girl. This is my good girl. It's kind of straight edge tinged. And this B girl. And printed those along with lyrics that tied into what they were doing, because I wanted to show that we could create the female form without focusing on 2 specific assets of that form, and show them actually doing something and feeling confident. So this is sold as individual prints and also in portfolios. So the portfolio sales, there's a percentage of the proceeds that goes to a group in Chicago known as She Crew. And that is run by 2 women who have a summer program for girls who are 12 to 14 who may otherwise be unable to attend any kind of summer program because it's completely free to them. So they learn how to cook, they learn how to perform, they learn how to write, and they build their own community in the summer. So I feel like it's really important to give to that. I started a massive project this past winter because I applied for and actually got a fellowship at the Newberry Library, which is a research institution in Chicago that's very open to pulling in artists and designers and people in the community. And this is really elaborate, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of it, except to say that some of the prints were really fun to do. As part of this series, I have these little old typefaces and these little word ornaments, and so this was a day they got to go on a field trip to the Newberry, and we found the actual specimen books where they were from, which was they're Chicago-based type specimen books, but they're extremely rare. So this is one of the few places where you could see them. And yeah, and then this is some of those word ornaments in action on one of the prints I did. I also want to help contribute to the community of letterpress in general. Sometimes that's teaching, sometimes that's talking. Sometimes it's being angry that I can't find the tools that I need, so I make them. The first of a planned series of these items is pica paper, which is actual graph paper that's gridded to the pica, which is 6 squares in an inch, which is exceptionally difficult to find. So I had it printed, I made covers, and now I sell the pads so that design and letterpress students can use those because it's so much easier to start sketching out your work if you actually are using the right math for what you're doing. So looking forward with the current state of the studio, I do have a wholesale catalog. I do wholesale prints and cards. I am about to throw it out this winter and start over with some new things because I've learned that some of the items I have that don't sell. And when you run a business, you have to not be married to everything that you create. So I have to learn from that, pick up the pieces, move on, and determine whether or not I stay in that field. I want to keep pushing this idea of this artistic printing, it's called. It's sort of late 1800s, using all these different ornaments and pieces because I think they should be used. I don't think they should be buried away. So if these things come into the studio, everything gets used, whether it's me creating something for myself or for a client. I've set a number of forms and altered them so that they can function as editorial illustration. So that's another field that I've been pushing into because there's a lot you can do to that once you take really great photos and kind of digitize them from there. Last year, I also started this weekend printer blog, which is an occasional series for new or up-and-coming printers with just a little weekly dose of here's how to do this one thing without being really overwhelming and assuming you maybe don't have all the things in the world to do the kind of work you want to do. There's some workarounds for that. So I try to get that out maybe once a month now to people just to check out. And if anyone wants to contribute or they want to say, hey, I've never learned how to do this, could you show me? I'm all ears, whatever I can do to help. And if I don't have something that could show you how to do it, the Platen Press Museum does, and I can photograph things there. This year I'll also have some guest posters, which is pretty exciting. And at the end of the day, I just look in the studio and think, am I creating work that's true to the mission, why I started this in the first place 20 years ago? Am I doing the kind of work I want to do? Is it consistent with my ideas about the world around me? Is it supporting my community? Is it helping people in some way? And if the answer is yes to at least 2 or 3 of those, then I know I'm doing okay. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I will say that at my table upstairs, we have a press set up, and I brought an actual elaborate type form that anyone can print today. I'm going to set it up when I'm done here. That's very specific to Ann Arbor. So if you have as much pride here as Chicagoans do about the city, then you may want to stop by and check that out.
This program was recorded on August 25th, 2018 at the Ann Arbor District Library.